Hi there and welcome everyone. This is Chris Carosa and I'm not in the studio the way you normally see me. That's right, we're doing another live remote, this time from deep within the heart of the Buffalo Convention Center, where we're learning about history and how to tell about history. That'll be our guests coming up in a moment. You're watching the State of Greater Western New York Report, and as always, it's brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Linden Honey Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hey there and welcome everyone. You see the studio's empty right now. That's right, that's because I'm on the road too, just like our guests are. And with me today is Bethany Hawkins. She's the Chief of Operations for the American Association of State and Local Historians. They're having their conference right now. We're in the middle of the conference in Buffalo, New York. I'm going to turn it over right to Bethany. Bethany, tell us a little bit about the AASLH. Do you have an acronym for that? Tell us a little bit about it, what it is, and why it's so important people learn about history.
Right. Well, thanks for having me on. We are the American Association for State and Local History, and people call us everything. We usually say AASLH, but people have everything made up. And we are actually based in Nashville, Tennessee, but we are a national professional association for people who work in the history field. So those are your people who work at your county historical society, maybe your local archives, your local historic site. And we have members all over the country, and they range from very small, all volunteer run local county historical societies, all the way up to the large folks like the strong National Museum of Play and Genesee Village.
So what made you guys decide to come to Buffalo? I mean, Buffalo has been having a number of conferences lately, but you're a large national organization. And I know I've been in the crowd, folks. There are people from all over, a lot of people from Texas, California. What's the farthest they've come from?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. But we do have well over 700 folks here from all over the country. This is the first time we've gotten together in mass after the pandemic. We've gathered online, but not in person, so that's good. But we are here, I'll tell you honestly, mainly because of Terry Abrams, who is with the Niagara County Historical Society. Terry has been an active member in AASLH for many, many years. He invited me here several years ago for a small meeting that we had of about 20 people. And he said he was hoping that he would plant the seed that we would come back to Buffalo for a conference. And so then a few years ago, he reached out and we were like, well, we haven't met in Western New York in a while. And we started talking to your Convention and Visitors Bureau. They were very hospitable and invited us to come up and take a site visit. And we started meeting with your local museum community, including Melissa Brown, our other co-host of the host committee. And, they were just, yeah, come on, because we do ask a lot of our hosts. But there were plenty of interesting things here for tours and evening events. And it is a very affordable city, a very walkable city. And you've got Niagara Falls, you've got all sorts of things. And so we have drawn a lot of historians here. And they've been out and about in your community, out and about in the surrounding Western New York region. I've been seeing it all posted on our social media feeds at hashtag AASLH 2022. If you want to see where all they've been visiting, you can check that out on Twitter or Instagram.
If you don't mind, and I know that you've got a lot of tours, field trips. They're like field trips. Remember when you were in school, you went on field trips? A lot of these historians have gone on field trips, not just within the city of Buffalo or even the Niagara Erie region, but all over the greater Western New York region. Tell us about some of those trips, and how did you find those? Whose ideas were they?
Well, that's one thing that we ask of our local host committee. We ask them to reach out to their colleagues and say, would you like to put a tour together? And they're showcasing their sites, their museums to their peers. So a lot of times we ask them if they will do maybe some behind the scenes tours where our folks may get to go back into the place where all the artifacts are stored, or maybe they get to try an educational program that a group may do if they come there on a field trip, and then they get a chance to feed back to the hosts of the tours. So the host committee did a great job putting together those tours. So yesterday we had tours to Canal Side, and we had tours to the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor, and then we had a full day tour that went to Genesee Village and the Jello Gallery. They loved that. There's a lot of photos on our social media feeds of both of those sites. Then today they're doing a architectural tour of City Hall. This afternoon they are going out and about as well. And then tonight we have an evening event at Canal Side where you may see historians roller skating.
I should also add that one of the tours was to the Theodore Roosevelt inauguration site. It was yesterday, September 14th, and the tour actually occurred to the minute, to the hour, to the day, 121 years later after President Roosevelt was inaugurated. And you guys are just missing by a few hours the hour, the day, the date of the first hamburger being sold, the birth of the burger on September 8th. You'll be traveling back home by that. So there's a lot of history here that people are experiencing. Tell me, is there one thing heading into the conference that really stuck out to you about Buffalo and our region in general?
Well, one thing is that you do have a strong local history community here. And they are at all levels, and they work very well together. They were able to come together and collaborate to put together all these experiences. They got us some great speakers, like Rick Hill is actually finishing up a keynote address as we speak, and talking about the power of place, which is our theme for the conference, from the indigenous people's perspective. So being able to bring in those resources really helped us, because it's an organization based in Nashville, and we travel all over the country with this conference. We couldn't bring some of those special opportunities for our attendees without these local partners that are so willing to step up and help us.
Sometimes my fingers don't move as fast as my mind tells them to move. So, Bethany, in terms of the people who are here, I know it's kind of still early in the conference, but what's the sort of feedback that you're getting from attendees?
People are loving Buffalo and Western New York. We had several members who came in early. They've been exploring the area over the weekend. There's been photographs from people that have went to Toronto, they went to Rochester, they went to Seneca Falls. I know some folks even went down to Corning, to the Corning Glass Museum. So they are really taking advantage of being in this area to get out and explore. And I think part of that is because it's been a while since we've been traveling, but Western New York is really calling to them. And they're posting pictures of buffalo wings or beef on weck. We've all learned what that means. And so, that's one thing that's so good about our members is they don't come just to come to a convention center like a typical conference might. They really want to get out and explore the living culture of the place that we're in.
So you mentioned food. Has anybody had buffalo pizza? Have you talked about that?
No, I haven't heard that.
Buffalo pizza is a thing. Buffalo and Detroit have a certain type of pizza with various names: burnt cup pepperoni, charred pepperoni. It's pepperoni that really kind of cups up and the edges get black. Oh, my mouth is watering just thinking about it. It's very good, and I would encourage people to go around. I mean, I don't think they call it buffalo pizza here. The Wall Street Journal called it buffalo pizza. That's why I'm coming up with the name. But it does have a unique taste. It's not just the pepperoni. it's also the sauce and the dough. But we're not here to talk about food, unless there's a history about pizza that we're not.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
But so you have people coming in, they're doing these things. What are they here really to learn? What's the takeaway? What are they supposed to bring back home with them?
Well, part of the role of AASLH is to provide professional development for people who work in history field. And our annual conference is one of the larger things we do. We also do an online conference for people who can't travel that is separate. But they come here, they want to hear what other organizations are doing that are successful, learn from other organizations' failures sometimes, but we're really here to find out a better way to connect the public with history. And so most of the folks who are here are considered public historians, and that's a term not a lot of folks know. A lot of times when you think of a historian, you think of a professor with patches on their sleeve and teaching in a class or writing books. But the folks who are members of AASLH are really the people that provide history to the general public. So that we're looking at ways to get more information about our sites, making sure we're telling full stories, thinking about what stories are being left out in the general historical narrative and how can we amplify those voices. And then also, how we can just do some professional development in our jobs. So, maybe there's a session on how to do marketing or how to do social media or how to do some human resources for some of our folks who may have had history degrees, but they really are still learning about how to run a nonprofit.
So one of the advantages to the public of learning about history, and especially to kids, is if taught in the right frame, history really imbues this sense of critical thinking within the recipient, within the audience. So Bethany, can you tell us how that works? How does critical thinking become an important part of learning about history?
That is something that we are very pleased to look back over the last several years and AASLH's role and just talking about critical thinking and historical thinking in general. Because a lot of times when I tell people that I work in the history field, they say, oh, yeah, I had that coach in high school that taught American history and just made us memorize a bunch of dates. And what we say is, that's not really history. We want to teach you to think critically about the things you read and think critically about narratives that are shared wherever you are getting your history information. And just think about, okay, we know there was the Declaration of Independence in 1776, but what led up to that, who signed the Declaration of Independence, what of their perspectives did they bring with them? Then what were the effects of that? I know we know that the United States of America is here because of the Declaration of Independence, but what else happened? Maybe what are some small ripples in the pond that led to that big eruption of the creation of the United States? So that's sort of what we mean by critical thinking or historical scholarship.
And a great way to do that for students especially is to have them role play. Put them in the position of those decision makers, those actors way back when, and don't tell them what they did. You have them guess. Have them, what would you do in this situation? And then see, hey, did you make the same decision as George Washington? Who knew? We got a minute or so before the break. I wanted to get another question about how you tell history, and this is something that I think the audience really finds interesting, and that is treating history. You're the historian now. Treating history as if you were Sherlock Holmes. You're trying to uncover facts, or CSI, or whatever your favorite detective is. Tell us how historians are like detectives.
Yeah, that's a great question. So historians are like detectives because if you think what a detective does, and everybody has seen something on TV, whether it's Law and Order or CSI, they know the facts. So they know that, oh, well, a person was mugged outside of a store. So, that is your fact. So if you have a historical fact, it's the same thing. Declaration of Independence signed in Philadelphia in 1776. But again, as that detective, they have to go back and they say, okay, well, who is the person that committed this crime? what led them to commit that crime, what evidence is there of that crime. And that's very much what historians do, using what we call primary source documents. And so those would be things that would have been written at the time when that historical event happened. So we would be looking at things written in 1776, or right after that. What were newspapers saying? What were people writing in their correspondence? And really, you get to dig through the archives, which is the fun part of being a historian. And then we also do that with material culture. So, what things were left by Thomas Jefferson or by Martin Luther King Jr. What are those things, those footsteps that we can look at that were left behind that can help us piece together the full case of what happened at that date and time.
Well, Bethany, thank you very much for being on today's show. We're going to take a quick break here now, and they'll bring on our next guest. We'll be right back.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination.
You want to switch
With the ages,
mics?
these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa. And again, we're live remoting this week, folks, from Buffalo, New York, the AASLH convention, the annual convention in Buffalo tonight. Right now, you're going to recognize this face. You're a third time. This is the third time you're on this show. We're going to have to do like Saturday Night Live and, give you a jacket or something when you hit number 5. It's Melissa Brown. She's the executive director of the Buffalo History Museum, a great place. We were actually there last night at an event. Melissa, so tell us, what does it feel like to have all these historians descend upon your turf? What are you showing them? What's some of the fun things that you're doing with all the folks here?
Well, thank you, Chris, and I'm really honored to be back with you, but also I think I actually am feeling a lot more emotional than I expected to. I think coming out of the pandemic, I was expressing to some of the guests last night that that was about the largest event we've had at the museum since the pandemic, and to see people in the space, but also people in the field who have been all going through the same things. They understand what it's been like trying to pivot and trying to deliver our services to the community in different ways. And, so we've all been going through the pandemic together, but I think last night in particular, and through some of the conference sessions that I participated in so far, it's really wonderful to just be with everyone together and kind of rekindling after these last couple of years.
So when you talk to people from all over the country, what is the one thing that they most often ask you about Buffalo and the Western New York region?
I feel like the questions are really varied. I think a lot of people, one of the big questions they ask, which I think is true to just museum visitors too, is orientation. Where am I? What a lot of times they'll know about the Pan Am history or the McKinley assassination, and they'll want to understand, where was that compared to the downtown Buffalo. And so a lot of questions about orientation. And because the terminus of the canal, while we do have the canal side now, but that connection isn't visibly evident in the landscape, I think people try to orient themselves that way as well, because those are some of the histories locally that resonate certainly nationally. And so people, I think orientation is one of the common themes I see.
So nobody's asking, oh, do I have a quick hour or two to maybe check out Times Square or the Statue of Liberty?
No, no one is asking that. I feel like we made a lot of headway in that regard. People definitely are understanding that Western New York is a distinct place with a real rich community story that's really evident in our built environment. And I think people, especially out-of-towners, really appreciate that. And that goes all the way back to when we hosted the National Trust over a decade ago. I think Buffalo itself doesn't realize its own, and is now its own embarrassment of riches in terms of how many really rich and wonderful stories we have here.
So tell us a little bit about what's going on at the museum. Do you have some new activities planned for going forward that people from around here can participate in?
Yes, so we at the museum have been really thinking about our relationship to the Native American community, and with the AASLH conference, our theme is the significance of place. And we were very honored to have that theme be here in Buffalo, because I think one of the stories that we've been thinking a lot about at the museum, and the Marie Watt exhibit, which is up right now, definitely speaks to a history long before the ones that have been traditionally told at the History Museum. So we're featuring Marie Watt's work. She is Seneca, but has not lived here for most of her life. And so it was initially going to be a traveling show, but she ended up doing site-specific work once we had expressed interest in bringing her here. And it's been in collaboration with Dr. Joe Stallman, who is the director of the Seneca Iroquois National Museum. And honestly, that will be up through October, but our continuing exhibit that you know about is also being featured, which really ties a lot of the different threads of our history, our local history, together in one experience.
Yeah, I was there last night. That is a very fascinating exhibition. The other thing that I noticed last night, and I got to ask you, so you have a big sports thing, which
Yes.
everyone, if you're a fan,
Go Bills.
Sabres,
Yes.
Braves, Bisons, however far back you want to go, definitely go there. But here's the thing I noticed. You got something for Allen and Diggs up there. So how old do you have to be before you're considered a historic relic?
So those were just added into a new case. The exhibit is really themed for icons. So the majority of the exhibit examines, and it was community sourced. So we actually asked the community, who do you think are the most iconic players, and what do you think are the most iconic moments in Buffalo sports? And we created the content based on that. And then the pieces that you're mentioning are in a changing case that just debuted 2 weeks ago, that changed from Braves history now to Fandemonium, and we were calling it memorabilia, to play off of what's being produced still today and kind of the new era. But I think when the story is significant, I think one of the things we really need to recognize is history is happening. It's not just what happened, it's happening right now, and there's a connectivity. And I love the energy of a conference like the AASLH conference, because I think that is very top of mind for the participants who are here, that history is an active presence and not something that happened to people 200 years ago.
They let you still say new era? You're not forced to say hi, Mark?
Well, I think we all slip. I mean, honestly, I still call it Rich Stadium sometimes. So
Yes.
I think that, depending on what era you're in, you have regressions that are excusable. And some people do correct you, but.
So I'm going to ask a question. I asked about the historians. What's the top question that they ask? But how about people from around here? What's the top question that they ask about their own history?
I don't know that there is a singular most top question that we receive, outside of, again, trying to get your bearings down. But I think what I found, especially like when we did debut the Icons exhibit, and before that we had a commemorative exhibit for Tim Hortons' death, and at the same time our bicentennial exhibit for the War of 1812 was running. And one thing that I remember about that period was that Tim Hortons exhibit brought a ton of people in who were not familiar with the museum. But then when they were exploring other areas, they're like, I had no idea, I knew about the Star Spangled Banner and I knew about Andrew Jackson and some of those threads that you learn about in school about 1812, but I didn't know, Buffalo was burned to the ground. I did not know about the Niagara, the Niagara activity that was really a key element of that whole period of history. And being from here, it's honestly very interesting. Or people who don't really know about the significance, they know about the Erie Canal, but maybe not how that changed lives so quickly and how much Buffalo grew exponentially. I think something like the population doubled every decade from the opening right through until the end of the 19th century. So I think those are the things people are surprised. And also I think one thing we see as a local history museum is people finding, like if they're coming in for genealogy or they're coming in to research historic house history, I think one of the things that feeds my passion for history is that seeing the light, that connection happen. And they're like, oh my gosh, I found a picture of my house from 1910. And so I really relish in those moments where people either connect because they intentionally came in looking for it, or unexpectedly they find something about their story locally that they didn't expect to find. And those are really exciting moments.
Are there any particular eras which sort of dominate the interest? Are people interested, say, in the early post-Revolutionary War, War of 1812 era of Buffalo, or are they more interested in its heyday in the late 1800s? Or are they more interested in what's happening more recently? What do you see in that?
So I see a change happening right now, Chris. I think historically people have always been very interested in the Pan Am, and I don't know if that's a really scientific assessment for me to make, because we are in the last remaining structure from the Pan Am. So there's very much a big part of our story that's tied up in that story. So that comes through. And I think why I say it's changing is I do think right now there's more of a movement to maybe dive into Buffalo's 20th century story and more recent past, a past that honestly, when I started working at the museum in 1998, people were not really, it was, let's move away from that story because it was super painful. But I think what we're all recognizing and what we're talking a lot about at this conference is that, history is all of those things. It's complicated, it's nuanced, it's not something you can just dip down into one book. I'm humbled. I've been studying history in different ways for a long time, and I'm still learning. I've learned several things just the last 2 days about our own local story that I didn't know about. So I would say it's changing a bit, and I would say that people are really open to stories that are more recent in the past, but also how that connects to experiences that are very relatable. All of a sudden, somebody 200 years ago, when you understand that as a vehicle, they become more relatable to you, and those are our ancestors.
So in terms of recent history, does this mean we're going to start getting a steel mill in the model railroad there on the
Well, there is the coal delivery bins. That was a
I
new
saw
addition
that. I
from
saw
the
that.
rail
I
barons.
like
So
that.
I
Yep,
think
yep.
the steel bins need to be added. And that's entirely done by volunteers. We have
Right.
a volunteer group that's actively recruiting to help bring new interest in. But yeah, I'll take that suggestion back to them, Chris.
So yeah, I mean that and the grain elders. I'll tell you. All right, so this is a dream of mine. Something that rivals the Chicago Museum of History in terms of rail, that tells about the grain elevators, just that section of
Just that
Buffalo,
story.
Buffalo, Lackawanna, steel mills, grain elevators, the confluence of all these different transportation systems. But I'm dreaming. So
Well, no, I think Bethany mentioned in the first segment, I think technology becomes a new tool for us, because all of a sudden you can tell those stories in new dimension and it's so much more accessible in terms of, AR and VR. And so I think that you're not dreaming. I think that that's very, very possible. And it's a great way to engage people and meeting them in the technology that they're using at home anyway.
So instead of flight simulator, we're going to have train simulator.
Yeah.
Put the
And
goggles on
put
and
the
drive
goggles
the
on.
train.
Some of the apps are right on your phone.
Drive
and you can
that
create
pig iron
environments.
to the coke ovens. Or I don't even know if that's the order that you do things. But hey, everybody, thanks for being a part of today's show. Remember, if you're live, if you're part of the audience that's invited to watch live, You can always ask questions, although I have to admit it's more difficult for me to see the questions when we're doing remote because I only have one screen. So if you ask questions and I missed it, I apologize. If you're not watching live, though, you can watch anytime you want on our site or be a friend or whatever they call it on Facebook. Like our Facebook page. You'll be notified at 1:30 on Sunday when the show is rebroadcast there. If you don't like Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Same time, same day, Sunday at 1:30. And guess what? You're not going to be missing the Bills game because they're playing on Monday night. Go Bills! All right, we'll see everybody later. And next week, we're going to be live remote again. That's all for now. Bye-bye.